We are not auditioning for fearless leader. We don't need a president to tell us what direction to go. We know what direction we want to go. We want the Paul Ryan budget, which cuts spending $6 trillion. We just need a president to sign this stuff. We don't need someone to think it up or design it. We have a House and a Senate. The leadership now for the modern conservative movement for the next 20 years will be coming out of the House and the Senate. So focus on electing the most conservative Republican who can win in each House seat and the most conservative Republican who can win in each Senate seat, and then pick a Republican with enough working digits to handle a pen to become President of the United States.
Where would you like that?
Right here, right here.
Okay.
Greetings and welcome to the Modern Alchemist channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is Talking Politics. Well, Donald J. Trump has been inaugurated our 45th president, and his first thing on his list to tick off and take care of was to dress the CIA, that's right, the Central Intelligence Agency, in Langley, Virginia, right in front of their memorial wall. And following that, people's heads exploded all over Washington, D.C. because Donald J. Trump went a little bit off script. In other news, today Donald J. Trump signed 3 executive orders. What's it all mean? And how can we learn about the esoteric by examining the policy-making decisions of the Trump administration? Well, it's Talking Politics, and we're going to do some esoteric schmackdown. Let's get started. Hi guys, I thought I'd take a few minutes and crank out another video just to kind of give some complexion and a little bit of perspective to what's going on, because obviously there's a lot of people just kind of, and the media is going crazy. I was working out this morning, and as I'm sitting there on the elliptical, I'm watching CNN, and they're just going on and on about the weekend, and then this morning I got to watch him sign those 3 executive orders. That was amazing. So here we are. It's Monday morning, and Donald J. Trump is hard at work. What did he do over the weekend? Well, the first thing he did, which really kind of blew people away, was he didn't go and talk to his base. He didn't go and talk to, some group, or do a Martin Luther King thing, or, just sort of like a get in there and unify. No, actually, he went to Langley, Virginia, and addressed the Central Intelligence Agency to a capacity crowd in the room that holds their memorial wall. And each one of those black stars, if you guys don't know about that, that's hardcore, you guys. That's for real. Each star represents a person, because the Central Intelligence Agency, they can't, when a person dies in service of the Central Intelligence Agency, there is no memorial, there's no grave, there's never a thing that says this is the dude that did this and here's what his life was about. Nuh-uh. You get a little black star on a white wall, and wow. So Donald Trump is up there, and what does he do? Oh my gosh, this is the man who, the entire time leading up to this speech, it was very adversarial, and now he does this complete pivot and says, no, we're all friends. In fact, what did he say? We're on the same wavelength. Check it out.
Well, I want to thank everybody, very, very special people, and it is true. This is my first stop, officially. I want to say that there is nobody that feels stronger about the intelligence community and the CIA than Donald Trump. There's nobody. Almost everybody in this room voted for me, but because we're all on the same wavelength, folks. We're all on the same wavelength, right? He knows. Took Brian about 30 seconds to figure that one out, right? Because we know we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, I mean, so what does this mean, though, right? What does this mean? Well, it means we're back in the Reagan years, folks. Between the speech that he gave during his inauguration, which he has received massive heat for, and which actually he shouldn't. To be quite honest and objective, anybody who's ever gone out and interviewed, I have done this. When I lived in Portland, Oregon, I was really curious about the deteriorating nature of all of the freeway overpasses and stuff like this, because I remember when those were built as a kid in the 80s, all of these overpasses and everything. And I know, having worked in construction, that certain concrete structures have a limited lifespan, and then they have to be repaired. If they don't, then you're in a problem. And then on top of that, especially in Portland, you have an entire area that literally has been built up on sand and stuff to support construction of the city along the Willamette River and stuff, which in an earthquake zone then creates what's called liquefaction, where the ground just vibrates and then everything just sinks like it was water. It's amazing. Now, all of this is stuff that when I interviewed the department of the manager of the traffic areas in Portland, he revealed to me, and he's like, yeah, this all needs to be repaired. No one's fitting the bill because, as he said to me at that time, it's just not sexy to talk about repairing infrastructure. That's just the worst. No one wants to talk about repairing infrastructure, which is why we have lead in the pipes of certain cities right now across the nation, because those pipes were constructed in a time when people didn't really give a shit about lead. And the water cleansing agents, which would be used to purify the water, weren't corrosive to those lead environments anyway. Now we're pumping in all these corrosive chemicals, releasing lead into the water, and you have, Michigan. So it's, and parts of my state have problems like that, as well as other states. Everyone who has water systems built at the turn of the century is going to have to address this. And that's just the water systems. The freeway systems, the bridge systems are atrocious. And this isn't like, everyone's like, oh, we're making it a hellscape. No, we've just ignored this, you guys, and we know it. We know it. Anyone my age knows that this stuff has been ignored, that every time a referendum would come up, it was ignored. So he's gotten criticism on this. Ronald Reagan approached the same thing. In the 1970s, the roads and systems like that were not necessarily wonderful, and as a component of our national security, the freeway system was put into place so that all the interstate freeways were federally funded as a component of our defense initiative. And in fact, the fact that we have such extensively awesome infrastructure from coast to coast is one of the reasons why our country has been kept safe. Because unlike other nations, which can't mobilize artillery or anything else, infantry, from one point to another without having difficulty. Remember, logistics is how you win wars. The United States has got this beautiful infrastructure, or at least it had. And so as a component of that, it needs to be repaired, right? Because you can't put these big freaking Abraham tanks over these bridges if these bridges might break under the weight of the tank. Get it? Like, this is the shit they're not talking about, but this is the stuff that's actually the reason behind these dialogues. And of course, since we're now in part of why I keep doing this association between Reagan and Trump is because their career mirrors one another in certain places, not the least of which is stuff like this.
Here's great news about two wonderful Baraxo hand cleaning products. First, Baraxo powdered hand soap in a new plastic decorator container. Looks like this on the grocer's shelf, and like this.
You really think this is the right thing for us to be doing, Ivana?
What will people think?
Let them talk.
Donald.
Ivana.
That's right. Just like President Reagan, Donald Trump has also been a pitchman for various companies. It's really, really important to recognize that, because it helps put you into proper perspective and allow you to mentally extract yourself from the bullshit stream here, where everyone is buying into and drinking the Kool-Aid, saying that Donald Trump is the guy. He's the decider. Listen, George W. Bush wasn't the decider. Now, let's backtrack historically and see how exactly we know about this and why it's important that Donald Trump went and addressed the CIA and said, I'm on your wavelength. Well, all you have to do is go back to 1980 and look at how Ronald Reagan won the election, which was a landslide victory in the Electoral College. Although he did have a popular vote landslide as well, but it was just like crushing victory, not unlike what we saw with Donald J. Trump. Okay, when you look at the map electorally reveals something entirely different than what the popular vote means. And as we discussed last week, we folks do not live in a democracy. We live in a republic. And so all of this is okay according to our Constitution. It's simply our lack of education relative to the nature of our government that has caused this. Plus, massive repetition of a lie. Democracy, 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 democracy. We keep hearing it. That's not what we live in. And the way to tell yourself, just like I showed you last week, check out the Pledge of Allegiance. To the republic for which it stands, one nation. That's right, one nation, which brings us to that whole fascist idea of empire building. But with regard to Ronald Reagan, so he was a pitch guy, his vice president, and always look at the number 2 if you want to understand who's really running things, right? If you hold the guy who's in charge, supposedly in charge, in objective view, and you say, okay, who's surrounding this person, you might have a better idea of who's actually in charge. In the case of Donald J. Trump, we saw that he's going to have people like Rex Tillerson and Mnuchin. He also has got massive support through both House and Senate. The entire group of people that is surrounding Trump is actually the ones that I'm looking at to see what exactly is going on in terms of policy-making decisions, right? And as we saw, like, here's Trump and he's handed it, where should I sign? That's the last time you'll ever see him ask that question, by the way. And it's because that's the whole working digits thing, right? He's the captain of the team. He's the guy who gets all the glory or all the infamy, depending on how this goes. But I'm telling you guys, he is going to make every detractor eat their lunch. He is just absolutely going to do it. It's part of the script. Now, how do we know? Well, part of how we know is just because he's gone right back to the old Republican playbook, but I forgot to mention the CIA connection. So Ronald Reagan's connection to the CIA is this. George Herbert Walker Bush. George Herbert Walker Bush was the director of the CIA up until his election as vice president. And then he was replaced by Director Casey, who perpetuated a program called Project Mockingbird, which was well in effect throughout the 70s. And that project basically states that when everyone in this country believes stuff that's wrong, then they know that their mission is complete, meaning that people are so confused as to what actually to believe, there's no footing. Now, what does that remind you of? It reminds you exactly of the tarot card, the Hermit tarot card, provided for us in the Economist magazine, where I did that analysis, and you're welcome to check that out. Here's the card, just quickly to remind you. Yeah, so the ground, all the ground everywhere, it's always in undulation and movement. So Ronald Reagan has George Herbert Walker Bush as his guy, and the association is clear, right? Because then George Herbert Walker Bush is in the White House for 12 years, because he's vice president for 8 and then president for another 4. And I think he was kind of surprised that he didn't get to be president for 8, but, you know, hey, things happen, right? So then we get George W. Bush, and of course he's insulated by members of George Herbert Walker Bush's own administration. In fact, Dick Cheney, who was Herbert Walker Bush's Secretary of Defense, becomes the vice president. So you've got this kind of chain of custody in case somebody's not really doing what they're supposed to. And I can't say that George W. Bush was, you know, some political Einstein. In fact, I feel like the idea that Grover Nordquist brings out in the beginning of this video, that we just want a guy who's got enough working digits.
And then pick a Republican with enough working digits to handle a pen to become President of the United States.
That's been the case since the 80s. At the very least, that has been the case since the 80s, when Ronald Reagan was elected president, and no one believed that he would do okay, right? We have a different president now, And he's functioning in a different capacity because this is what they need. What they need is a lightning rod. What they need is a guy who's going to be provocative, who's going to force people into action, force them into thinking, force them into dialogue. And this is what's going on. And he's striking as he's doing that. Bang, bang, bang. So his speech to the CIA, where he went completely off script, is so obvious that he went off script. And people only do that when they think they're in a friendly crowd. Like these were his people.
Because we're all on the same wavelength, folks. We're all on the same wavelength, right? He knows.
I want you to objectively realize that when a person publicly speaks before a group and they go off script like he did, and they are so familiar, and there's, him thumbs upping people, and hey, how's it going? And we'll do lunch later. Stuff like that. That kind of person has a different kind of relationship than the kind of person that you have seen presented publicly. And you must realize, and this is for everyone, that the media is maintaining a specific dialogue. So if you're constantly tuned into this dialogue, you're going to hear the same message over and over and over. And if you objectively watch it, you can actually see them create the dialogue from day to day. And there are supercuts of this, which are epic, where they just begin the same thing,
That the scales were tipped unfairly through fake news.
Is this the year of fake news?
Fake news.
Fake news is shared more than ever.
Fake news stories.
So much fake news out there.
Fake news.
The growing and booming business of creating fake news.
So-called fake news.
Fake news stories.
Fake news websites.
To eliminate any hoaxes or fake news content on Facebook.
A fake news story, fake news conspiracy.
The fake news is
Making fake news.
into the fake news phenomenon.
Problem of fake news.
Fake news is getting out there.
Industrialized fake news operations.
Media that focus on scandals and spread fake news to smear politicians risk becoming like people who have a morbid fascination with excrement.
Following this week, fake news that
Being a fake news story.
When fake news stories use the name.
They always talk about certain things and there'll be a catchphrase that suddenly everyone's using. Because all of these media organizations ultimately are run by just 5 companies. At the very top, you're welcome to check that out. It is fascinating to check where the money goes and where all this stuff is connected. It's very easy to find out, by the way. So today we were treated to Donald Trump signing 3 executive orders, the first of which was the elimination of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is totally to be expected, right? He campaigned on this, but more importantly than just him fulfilling a campaign promise is the fact that this is an exemplification of the pillar of severity. Now remember, we broke it down briefly, and I'm going to do it again for you right now. In the Kabbalah, there are 3 pillars. There's the pillar of severity, which is headed by Saturn on the very top. Over here, there is the pillar of mercy on the left, which is headed by the agent pro tem is the sun, acting instead of cosmic consciousness because of its historical relevance, okay? So the sun then fulfills that role, and they stand in opposition, the sun and Saturn. And then descending from it are several planetary influences. And of course, down the center, you have the middle pillar, the pillar of mildness. That's where you're supposed to be standing, so that you can use both hands when you're working whatever you're doing. And you can use both eyes when you're seeing whatever it is you're trying to see. When we talk, this dialogue then will give you a sense of the dualism that is presented within American governance, because everything in our country is set up dualistically. And while it seems that it's forced, it's actually a product of the construction of our government, which we just talked about last week. And if any of this stuff if you'd like more information, I actually have several classes discussing Kabbalah on this website. So please feel free to check them out. And I'll be teaching Kabbalah more this year. So feel free to check out those playlists, and let's continue. Since our government has transitioned from the pillar of mercy to the pillar of severity, by association, by our withdrawal from the ideals or ethics of Jupiter in replacement for the ideals and ethics of Mars, On the side of Jupiter, you have ideals of federation, right? Where a group of individuals will gather together and create a partnership. And so during the Obama administration, we created the Trans-Pacific Partnership because that is what a federation does. Now that we've had a transition in government, we're on the other side, the other pillar. Remember, they're both the same tree. That's the trick, guys. Never forget that this is all one tree. It is the tree of life, divided into 3 branches or 3 pillars, but it's all the same tree. It's all the same instrument being used as if it were separate, but it's not. And as long as you understand that, you're going to have some peace when looking at what the heck is going on with the government. So on the pillar of severity, you have Mars, and Mars is not about the individual. Mars is about the group. Mars says unify. We are empire. We unite. Strength and honor. You know, like the Horde in World of Warcraft. Whereas, you know, you get on the Alliance side in Warcraft, it's for the Alliance, right? It's for the group, as opposed to, you know, for the group as of individuals, right? Because we're an alliance, we're a federation. So, with regard to the withdrawal of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the assertion that we have the right to act unilaterally, this is a clear indication that our government is now moving in this direction. And I would anticipate from this time forward, especially given the nature that we're moving into a Reagan ex-est period, where you're going to see massive growth within infrastructure and construction, you're going to see some economic gains of extraordinary proportions, you're going to see lots and lots of social unrest paired off against all these economic gains, because that's exactly how this would work. Whereas Mercury, which deals with commerce and it's sitting under the pillar of severity, it's working on these economic gains because that's what we're looking at. Over here on the pillar of mercy under Venus, who deals with partnerships, literally partnerships, and that deals with people partnerships and equal rights and civil rights, all of those kind of partnerships. Those are also going to be brought out, but they're going to be overshadowed by all of this economic force. That's just the way it's going to wind up working out. So any gains that we made over the last 8 years, the best that anyone of our liberal mindset could do is now hold your ground, as opposed to seek further gains or advances. That's just kind of the way I anticipate this would work. Similarly, anyone who was in a position where economically you were restricted as a result of partnership agreements which didn't allow for unilateral action, like Exxon, right? Because they were restricted by agreements that we had with other nations, those are now all going to go away. And you're going to see the United States literally draping itself in terms of commerce over the world, not unlike the Empire or the Emperor card for the reading that I provided. Yeah, so that is the first thing. The second thing to know that we're in empire mode is that we had a hiring freeze for all federal agencies and all federal government employees except for the military. That was something that Donald Trump was really, really, really specific about.
Next, a federal government employee hiring freeze.
Except for the military.
Except for the military.
Except for the military.
He's like, everyone else, and then as he's signing, he's like, except for the military. Now, why is that important? Because to Mars, the military is all important, and Mars is sitting right there under the pillar of severity, right under Saturn, and he's just waiting there going, nom, 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 chomping at the bit, going, when can I come into play? So, having a hiring freeze, what this means is, this is an exemplification of how the two pillars function in economic terms. The Democratic Party, which is ruled under the pillar of mercy, it gets economic gains when people are unemployed by creating jobs within government, then taxing the people in order to supply funds to pay for those jobs. So essentially we're taking care of ourselves and we're taking care of our environment by pumping more energy into it, right? Of course, this is then a definitive reallocation of wealth, which is an anathema to the other side, right? Because they're not about the end of, you know, it's this weird dualism. It just makes your head want to explode. because Mars is the guy who stands up. It's so strange. He stands up for the individual, but it's a collectivist type of thing. So on one hand, Mars will sit there and fight the corporate state because the little guy is getting squashed so much, and he'll provide the breaking point, which is that active 5 energy that's present within Gabora, right, which is that part of the tree. It will break that up. But in the same sense, it's also this stabilizing influence in case the chaos of Jupiter is too much. If Hesed is too much, then it stops that, right? It's this weird, and of course Hesed creates this beautiful balancing act with 4. Anyway, that's part of all of this, but with the Democratic Party, they create departments of government in order to supply more for the people and clean things up. The Republicans are like, no, but if you want to work for us, you're welcome to join the military. And of course, then that gives you the whole kind of Star Trek analogy, right? Or Starship Troopers analogy might be a bit more appropriate, since I feel Star Trek's a bit more on the left and Starship Troopers is definitely on the right. So it's more like Starship Troopers here, with Van Hoven's definitely a fascist vision of the future, right? Where citizenship can be earned through service in the military, which in fact it can already be done. Anyway, so this is part of what Trump is doing. He's breaking that up, and he wants only the military to be supported because that industrial engine needs to be maintained. It's going to be put into use, most likely. The final thing that he reinstated was a typical thing that I expected to see undone almost immediately, and that's this Mexico City rule, which is essentially that foreign agencies that receive federal funds can't inform or advertise customers that abortion is a family planning method. And so that funding, if you want federal funding, you can't mention abortions or educate people about them as an alternative to as a family planning alternative. So that was expected to be signed. Literally, Obama got in office, and exactly 8 years to this day, he reversed it. So I expected immediately that Trump would flip that one, right? So, all right, that's another episode of Talking Politics on the Modern Alchemist channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist. Be at peace, you guys. Recognize that this system, this was all in place for a long time. And becoming angry because of that is kind of like raging against the wind in a windstorm. It's pretty much pointless. It's much better to figure out how to outfit yourself to accommodate that. Or if you're a surfer, you certainly don't get mad at the water. You work with the water and you surf that tube. And that's really what we need to do. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is Talking Politics on the Modern Alchemist channel. I'll be talking to you soon.